Rabbi,
Yes.
in today's day and age, what do you think our relationship should be to these outside sciences, both in the physical sciences and the philosophy in general?
In the time of Aristotle, science and philosophy were considered much the same. They were empirical science had not really been developed, and when it came to understanding the physical world as well, people such as Aristotle spun theories. They didn't test them really. They spun theories. Maybe they didn't. You could claim they didn't always have the wherewithal to test them. That's also perhaps true. But they would spin a theory. They would theorize. They would come up with an hypothesis or a notion, and they would run with it. And they would therefore, and then reach all kinds of conclusions, even theological or spiritual conclusions, which were actually baseless. So that kind of thought has, I think, Baruch Hashem, been left behind. If one wishes to understand how human beings see, is it because the eye emits light or a field of energy which perceives that which is beyond the eye, or whether the light reflected from all those objects is received by the eye and then interpreted by the brain, and then we can make sense of it, which is all actually miraculous. And the more you try and understand that, the more you realize how miraculous it is. That's also very true. But they didn't have any such capability at that time, 2,500 years ago. So what they often considered science was not science at all. It was just meandering human thoughts full of error and confusion and supposition. So supposition is really not of any great value, and you can say the same about many philosophers from that time to the present. That many of their ideas are just the various notions that occur to this or that person at some point. They do not obligate us in any way. They do not teach us very often very much. On the one hand, on the other hand, there are Hachamim in the world. Yesh Chochmah b'goyim ta'amin. There is such a thing, and but these things can be tested. We can see, in other words, if a certain philosopher came up with a certain perception, and you see that this explains many things, and the world works that way, and you are therefore now a wiser person having read that. Well, okay, there is some benefit to that, perhaps, but how much? The question, of course, is how much time you're going to spend on that, and for whom are these things of value? The truth is, only for a very small minority and a certain intellectual elite can find time and will find any purpose in delving into such things. Most people will not. Rambam, for instance, found himself in a time and a place where many people, anyone who wished to be considered a learned individual, was involved in such studies. But today, try and convince most people in the world today to take Aristotle seriously about on many of the things that he wrote, not perhaps his political treatises and such things, but his perceptions of the physical world, what he would have described as science. We would think these things are or his perception of the universe, of astronomy. We think we know this not to be true, and we understand that these were simply hypotheses without any experimental or empirical basis. So these things do not interest, quite rightly, do not interest people nowadays. And that's one of the reasons why most people nowadays will not spend a lot of time studying Moreh Nevuchim or Mivhar HaEmunot V'Adeot of Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon or other such works, or at least not those parts of those works that deal with such matters. when on the other hand, Rambam discusses more specifically the Torah and how you should understand certain things in the Torah. Some of those insights and ideas are very profound and very helpful. But how to argue with Aristotle and how to disprove him, most people today would tell you, this doesn't interest me, and they have a point. Now, as for true science, science is not just theory. Science is science. In other words, something which is based on real-world observation, empirical evidence, which can be repeated and which can be shown to be true and is therefore also beneficial, helpful, and allows for progress in various fields. That's what we call science. That is something that we should be involved in. Who should be involved in that? Those people, of course, who are capable and were drawn to those things. And others will not be drawn to those things, are incapable of such intellectual feats and studies, and they won't study that. They'll do something else, and that's fine. That's how the world works. That's the world that Hashem created. All people have their own talents and their own capabilities and their own leanings and predilections, and that's how it should be. But when speaking about, shall we say, essentially, if you take the Darwin's theory of evolution, the truth is that scientifically today it has been demonstrated that it's completely inoperative. It does not work. It's an interesting idea, but Darwin was unable to bring any scientific proof for the essential tenets of his thought. He posited certain ideas, and he said, if I think so, and I think A and B and C and D, then I can also claim E, F, and G. And that's possibly true, but it doesn't prove that it's correct. And by the way, even if you were to accept everything that Darwin said, even though, as I say, much of it has been shown to not work because of a much more correct and accurate and profound understanding of biology and biophysics and biochemistry and what have you, not to mention DNA. It's not Darwin didn't know about DNA because he couldn't know about DNA. And if you cannot explain Darwinian theory in terms of what we know to be true about the essentially digital information contained in the DNA, which is the basis of all living organisms, well then that whole theory basically breaks down. And that's what honest scientists in the field today will tell you. Those who are less honest or have a problem, they cannot really deal with that. So they say, well, you have good questions. We'll work on it some more. But the truth is that the only real explanation is that information comes before the organism, not the other way around. And for a new life form, you need new DNA. DNA is information. Where does information come from? Information comes from an intelligence. If I give you a code, a string of letters or numbers which make no sense on the face of it, so you can either reach the conclusion that this is just gibberish, or that it's a code from an intelligent source. But there's no such thing as a code from an unintelligent or non-existent source. So if there is DNA, and there is, and if there's information included in it, which there is, then there is an intelligence behind that. And that alone undermines the essentially atheistic view of reality that Darwin was proposing based on some of his ideas. So the theory of evolution can no longer be considered a valid scientific proposition. It was an attempt to understand certain things at a time when human beings still did not know much that we know today, and it can be set aside. certain things that Darwin said nevertheless are correct or can be correct, might be correct, but not the overall concept, the general picture that from a one-cell organism everything simply somehow autonomously developed and evolved. That's not possible. That's not doable. A new body plan requires a new set of instructions. So that is science. It's science that disproves the theory of Darwinian evolution more than even before you speak of the Torah. When it comes to other areas of science, which are real, which are STEM studies, engineering, mathematics, physics based on reality, not hypothesizing about the origin of the universe, which is beyond our ken anyhow. That's therefore not science. That's again philosophy. That's spinning thoughts and ideas without having to take any responsibility for what you're saying, without it being possible to either prove it or disprove it. So that's not really science. That's just talk. Real science is something which can be demonstrated, which can be observed, which can be and also utilized. And those things are important, and the Jewish people must be at the forefront of such things, no question. And there are many people who are so inclined, and they should utilize their God-given talents and abilities for the purpose of understanding Hashem's Bria and propelling forward the Jewish people and science in general to be used for good. We cannot allow ourselves to fall behind other people, especially not our enemies.